First strike. The emergency alert pierced through the peaceful evening on New Eden Colony. Captain Sarah Chen was already moving before her neural implant finished processing the message. 3 unidentified vessels had dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, their signatures unlike anything in the Allied Species database. Status report, she barked, striding into the colony's defense center. The holographic display showed 3 angular ships, their hulls seeming to absorb rather than reflect light. No response to hails, Captain, Lieutenant Rodriguez reported, his fingers dancing across the haptic interface. They're running silent and cold. Energy signatures minimal. Sarah studied the tactical display, something pricking at the back of her mind. 20 years of military service had honed her instincts, and right now those instincts were screaming that something wasn't right. The ship's approach was too precise, too measured. "They're hunting," she muttered, then louder. "Full alert. Power up the defense grid but keep it in passive mode. I want all civilian ships grounded immediately." Her staff moved with practiced efficiency, but she could sense their confusion. In the 50 years since humanity had joined the galactic community, New Eden had never faced a serious threat. The peaceful species that made up the Allied Species Coalition had welcomed humans with open arms, fascinated by their unique evolutionary history as persistence predators. The incoming ships suddenly accelerated, their energy signatures flaring to life. They were masking their true power output, Sarah realized. Rodriguez, pattern analysis. It's like nothing we've seen, Captain. The Allied Species database has no matches. These aren't from any known civilization. Sarah felt a smile tugging at her lips despite the danger. Modern space combat relied heavily on eye-targeting systems and predetermined tactical protocols. But humans had spent millions of years as hunters, and some instincts couldn't be programmed. "They're splitting up," Rodriguez reported. "Standard 3-point attack formation." Standard for whom? Sarah mused. "Look at their approach vectors. They're not maximizing coverage of our defense grid's blind spots. They're setting up for something else." She closed her eyes, visualizing the space around the colony. What would she do if she were hunting this prey? Her eyes snapped open. They're not here for the colony. The civilian ships in orbit. They're hurting them. "Lieutenant, get me a firing solution on these coordinates." She rapidly input a series of numbers. "But Captain, there's nothing there." "Not yet. Trust me." The enemy vessels continued their approach, ignoring the colony's attempts at communication. As they drew closer, their formation tightened, creating a net that would force any fleeing ships directly into. "Energy spike," Rodriguez shouted. "Something's emerging from hyperspace exactly where you predicted." A massive vessel materialized precisely where Sarah had indicated, its weapon systems already charging. But Sarah was ready. Fire. New Eden's defense platforms erupted, their carefully hidden power finally unleashed. The massive ambush vessel took the full brunt of the colony's firepower before it could raise its shields. The 3 smaller ships immediately broke formation, their carefully coordinated hunt disrupted. "They didn't expect us to spot their trap," Sarah said, allowing herself a moment of satisfaction. "They're used to prey that runs, not prey that bites back. Rodriguez, get me a channel to Earth Command. And find out everything you can about these ships. Something tells me this isn't going to be an isolated incident." The battle for New Eden lasted another 6 hours. The unknown attackers fought with sophisticated technology, but rigid tactics, unable to adapt when their initial strategy failed. They hadn't counted on facing opponents whose ancestors had spent millennia perfecting the art of the hunt. When it was over, Sarah stood in the debris field that had once been the enemy fleet, watching as recovery teams began their work. Her neural implant pinged with an incoming priority message from Earth Command. The attack on New Eden hadn't been isolated. Similar vessels had been spotted in 12 other systems. Humanity had just been thrust into its first interstellar conflict, and their peaceful allies were looking to them for protection. The galaxy was about to learn why evolution had kept Earth's predators around for so long. As she prepared her report, Sarah couldn't help but appreciate the irony. Humanity had spent centuries trying to overcome their violent past, only to discover that their predatory instincts might be exactly what the galaxy needed. The real question was, who were these new hunters, and what had driven them to start this war? The answers would come soon enough. For now, she had a colony to protect and a message to send to any other would-be attackers. Earth's children hadn't lost their teeth, and they remembered how to hunt. The Hunter's Code. Admiral James Wong sat motionless in his office aboard the Terran Defense Force headquarters, studying the holographic display before him. The attack patterns of the unknown enemy, now dubbed the Shroud for their light-absorbing ships, danced in the air. 6 weeks had passed since the first strikes, and the pattern was becoming clear. "They're not just hunters," he murmured. "They're apex predators who've never faced real competition." Dr. Maya Patel, the TDF's leading xenobiologist, nodded from across his desk. "That's exactly what my analysis suggests. Their biology, based on the recovered specimens, shows signs of engineered evolution. They've artificially accelerated their development, but they've lost something in the process." "Adaptability," James said. "They've optimized themselves for a specific hunting strategy, but they can't adjust when it fails. Show me the New Eden footage again." The hologram shifted to show Captain Chen's defense of the colony. Maya leaned forward, her eyes bright with understanding. "Look at how they react when their trap is sprung early. There's no improvisation, no tactical shift. They simply execute their predetermined attack pattern, even though the element of surprise is lost." James stood, pacing the length of his office. The curved window offered a view of Earth below, peaceful and blue. "We've seen this before, haven't we? On Earth, when a species becomes too specialized, too perfect at one way of hunting, they become vulnerable to change." Maya finished. "The saber-toothed tiger's magnificent fangs became a liability when its prey adapted. The Shroud have fallen into the same evolutionary trap, just on a galactic scale." A soft chime announced the arrival of Fleet Captain Marcus Torres, his dark features set in a grim expression. "Admiral, we've finished analyzing the data from the Arcturus engagement. You're going to want to see this." The holographic display shifted again, showing a battle between Shroud vessels and a mixed fleet of human and allied species ships. The allied vessels were more advanced, their weapons more powerful, but they moved with a hesitation that proved costly. "Our allies are fighting like prey," James observed. "Even with superior technology, they're letting the Shroud dictate the terms of engagement. Show me the human ships only." The display filtered to highlight the Terran vessels. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned, they moved with fluid unpredictability, using the chaos of battle to their advantage. "We're fighting like predators," Marcus said. "Not just any predators. Persistence hunters. We're wearing them down, disrupting their patterns, forcing them to expend energy inefficiently." Maya pulled up her research notes. "It's fascinating. The allied species evolved from grazing or scavenging ancestors. Their instincts tell them to seek safety in numbers, to flee from danger. But humans, we chase our prey until it collapses," James finished. "We're not stronger or faster, but we never stop coming. And we learn. Each engagement teaches us more about their patterns, while they seem incapable of adapting to ours." The Admiral turned to his officers. "What we need now is a way to share our instincts with our allies. They have the technology and numbers, but they lack the predatory insight that makes our tactics effective." "Sir," Marcus ventured, "I have an idea about that. The Arcturus data shows something interesting. When human ships took point positions in the Allied formations, the entire fleet's effectiveness increased. It's like they were unconsciously following our lead, tapping into hunting patterns they didn't know they had." Maya's eyes widened. "Of course, most species have some vestigial predatory instincts, even if they evolved away from them. We're not teaching them to be hunters. We're awakening something that was always there. James nodded slowly, a plan forming in his mind. Captain Torres, I want you to establish joint training programs with our allied fleets. Full integration, mixed crews, shared command structures. Dr. Patel, work with our xenopsychologists to develop training protocols that will help our allies access those dormant instincts. Sir, Marcus hesitated. Some of our allies are uncomfortable with humanity's predatory nature. They accept us as protectors, but this level of integration might meet resistance. Then we'll show them what that predatory nature really means, James said firmly. We're not mindless killers. We're protectors who understand the hunt. Our ancestors didn't become apex predators through strength alone, but through cooperation, strategy, and adaptation. He turned back to the holographic display, watching the dance of ships and energy weapons. The Shroud think they're the perfect hunters, but they've forgotten the most important lesson of evolution. Perfection is a dead end. It's the ability to change, to adapt, to work together that ensures survival. As his officers left to implement his orders, James remained at the window, watching Earth rotate slowly below. Humanity had spent centuries trying to overcome their violent past, seeing their predatory nature as something to be tamed. Now those very instincts might be the key to saving galactic civilization. The Shroud had awakened something in the galaxy, not just humanity's hunting instincts, but a reminder that cooperation between predator and prey could create something stronger than either alone. The next phase of the war would test this theory, as human officers began training their allied counterparts in the art of the hunt. In the darkness of space, the Shroud continued their methodical advance, unaware that their perfect hunting strategy was about to meet something they had engineered out of their own species generations ago: the chaos and adaptability of natural evolution. The hunters were about to become the hunted, and humanity would lead the chase. Pack mentality. First Lieutenant Amara Patel stood in the observation deck of the TDF training facility Artemis, watching the strange ballet unfolding in space before her. A mixed squadron of human and Galactic Alliance vessels wove through a complex series of maneuvers, their movements gradually becoming more coordinated with each pass. "They're starting to get it," her XO, Lieutenant Commander Kai Chen, remarked. The Centaurians especially. Their natural spatial awareness is incredible once they stop second-guessing their instincts. Amara nodded, making notes on her neural interface. The Centaurians, with their four-lobed brains and compound eyes, had evolved as canopy-dwelling herbivores. Their defensive instincts had made them exceptional pilots for straight-line escape maneuvers, but they struggled with offensive tactics. Until now. "Watch Formation 3, she said, highlighting a group of ships on the holographic overlay. A Centaurian cruiser led two human frigates in a spiraling approach that looked chaotic, but followed a deeper pattern. They're not just mimicking our movements anymore. They're anticipating, coordinating, like a wolf pack." The comparison was apt. Humanity had spent millions of years perfecting pack hunting strategies, and now they were teaching those ancient lessons to species that had never known the thrill of the chase. A soft chime announced the arrival of Ambassador Zirain of the Delphian Confederation. The tall, ethereal being glided into the observation deck, their bioluminescent patterns shifting in what Amara had learned to recognize as nervous excitement. "Remarkable progress," the ambassador said, their translated voice carrying harmonics of wonder. "When your Admiral Wong first proposed this integration program, many on the council thought it would fail. Our species are too different," they said. "Our evolutionary paths too divergent." "And now?" Amara asked, though she could guess the answer from the ambassador's light patterns. "Now we understand what your scientists have been telling us, that predatory instincts, properly channeled, need not lead to mindless aggression. You are teaching us to be, what is your term? Sheepdogs. Protectors," Kai supplied. "Predators who defend rather than simply hunt." The holographic display shifted to show another training group, this one practicing counter-ambush tactics. The Shroud's latest attacks had grown more desperate as their perfect hunting patterns failed against the increasingly coordinated Allied response. "There's been another development," Zarin said, their lights dimming slightly. "Our long-range scouts have detected something troubling. Perhaps you should see for yourself." The ambassador interfaced with the holoprojector, bringing up a series of readings that made Amara's breath catch. Deep in unexplored space, massive energy signatures were gathering. The Shroud weren't just launching raids anymore. They were assembling an invasion fleet. "How long?" she asked. 3 standard months, perhaps 4, before they reach populated space. They're abandoning their hit-and-run tactics for something bigger, more desperate. Kai studied the data with a tactical eye. "They're adapting, finally. But it's a blunt adaptation. If you can't win with surgical strikes, try overwhelming force. Like a wounded predator lashing out." Amara mused. "They don't know how to deal with failure, so they're falling back on pure aggression." "Ambassador, how many ships can the Alliance commit to a defensive action?" "Not enough." Zarin's lights pulsed with concern. "Even with your tactical advantages, the numbers aren't everything." Amara interrupted, an idea forming. "Ambassador, what if we could show the Council a demonstration? Not just of our training programs, but of how effective a truly integrated force can be." The next week saw a full-scale war game organized in the Artemis system. Representatives from every Alliance species gathered to watch as a mixed fleet of human and alien vessels faced off against a superior force of automated drones programmed with Shroud attack patterns. What they witnessed changed the galaxy's understanding of warfare. The Allied fleet moved like a single organism, combining the best traits of each species: Centaurian spatial awareness, Delphian energy manipulation, human tactical adaptation, all flowing together in a deadly dance. When it was over, the automated opposition had been completely neutralized, with minimal simulated casualties on the Allied side. The observers sat in stunned silence until Ambassador Zarin began to pulse with brilliant colors of triumph. "This," they announced to the gathered representatives, "is what we can become together. Not prey learning to be predators, but something entirely new. A force that protects through strength, coordination, and intelligence." The Council's approval for full integration came 3 days later. As training facilities like Artemis began operating at maximum capacity, Amara found herself promoted to commander and tasked with expanding the program across Alliance space. "The Shroud think they forced us to change tactics," she told her new command staff, a diverse group of humans and aliens united in purpose. "But they don't understand what change really means. They engineered themselves for perfection, removing the supposed weaknesses of their evolutionary past. We're embracing our histories, all of them, and turning them into strength." As she watched another mixed squadron execute a flawless hunting pattern, Amara realized that humanity had given the galaxy more than just tactical knowledge. They had shown that predatory instincts, tempered by intelligence and compassion, could become a force for protection rather than destruction. The massive Shroud fleet continued its inexorable advance, unaware that they were no longer facing a collection of disparate species. When they arrived, they would meet a true coalition, one that combined the best aspects of both predator and prey. The galaxy was learning new ways to hunt, and the lesson would prove costly for those who had forgotten the true meaning of adaptation. Apex evolution. The war room aboard the Alliance flagship Prometheus hummed with activity as Fleet Admiral Helena Santos studied the latest intelligence reports. The massive holographic display showed the approaching Shroud Armada, over 3,000 ships strong, moving in formations that would have been beautiful if they weren't so lethal. "They finally adapted," she said to her assembled command staff, a mix of human and alien officers who had proven themselves in the months of preparation. "Look at these patterns. They're not just hunting anymore. They're implementing variations based on their losses." Her tactical officer, a Centaurian named Valthrax, manipulated the display with his neural interfaces. "Indeed, Admiral. They've incorporated elements of our own strategies. But His compound eyes shifted, and what Helena had learned was amusement. "They're doing it wrong." "Explain," Helena commanded, though she was beginning to see it herself. "They're copying the surface patterns without understanding the underlying principles," Valthrax said. "Like a predator mimicking another's hunting style without the proper instincts to make it work. They see our pack tactics, but they don't understand pack mentality." Dr. Yuki Chen, the fleet's chief xenobiologist, stepped forward. Her research into predator psychology had been crucial in developing their new combat doctrine. "It's exactly what we predicted. The Shroud engineered themselves for perfect execution of predetermined patterns. They can copy new patterns, but they can't truly innovate. They don't have the neural plasticity for genuine adaptation." Helena smiled grimly. The Shroud's genetic engineering had made them incredibly efficient hunters, but in removing what they saw as evolutionary weaknesses, they had sacrificed their ability to truly evolve. It was time to show them the cost of that trade-off. "Signal the fleet," she ordered. "Operation Shadow Dance begins in 6 hours. Let's show them what real adaptation looks like." The Allied fleet waited in the Aegis system, their ships arranged in what appeared to be a standard defensive formation protecting the colony worlds beyond. But this was no ordinary fleet. Every vessel had been modified with technology that merged the unique capabilities of multiple species. Delphian energy manipulation combined with human tactical systems, Centaurian spatial awareness, enhancing Arcturian shield harmonics. As the Shroud fleet dropped out of hyperspace, their initial scans would show exactly what they expected to see: prey preparing for a desperate last stand. The trap was baited not with weakness, but with apparent predictability. "Enemy fleet has arrived," Valthrax reported. "They're moving to engage. Yes, they're using their adapted version of our Wolfpack formation." Helena watched as the massive Shroud armada split into hunting groups, each targeting what they perceived as weaknesses in the Allied formation. "They think they've learned how we hunt. Signal all ships. Execute evolution protocol." What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come. The Allied fleet didn't just break formation, it transformed. Ships that appeared to be capital vessels split into smaller attack craft. Apparent weaknesses in the defensive line became deadly crossfire zones. What looked like a traditional fleet defense became a constantly shifting, adapting organism of war. The Shroud's adapted tactics crumbled in the face of this unprecedented strategy. Their attempts to copy alliance maneuvers became predictable weaknesses to be exploited. Every time they adjusted their approach, the Allied fleet had already evolved beyond it. "This is remarkable," Dr. Chen breathed, watching the tactical display. "Every species is contributing their unique strengths, but it's more than that. They're combining them in ways we never even considered during training." She was right. Helena watched as a wing of Centaurian ships used their superior spatial awareness to coordinate a complex attack pattern, while Delphian vessels manipulated local spacetime to create tactical advantages. Human ships darted through the chaos with predatory precision, turning the enemy's formation against itself. It wasn't just different species working together. It was evolution in action. "The Shroud are attempting to regroup," Valthrax reported. "Their command ships are pulling back to implement a new attack pattern." "They still don't understand," Helena said. "They think this is just another tactical variation they can analyze and counter. They don't realize we're not executing a plan. We're adapting in real time. Every ship, every species, contributing to our collective evolution." "Signal all commands. Begin Phase 2. The next stage of the battle demonstrated why humanity's predatory nature had proven so crucial to the Alliance. It wasn't just their hunting instincts or combat tactics, it was their understanding of controlled aggression. The fleet moved like a wolf pack that had learned to incorporate the strengths of every species in the galaxy. Shroud vessels found themselves herded into killing zones by maneuvers they couldn't predict because they evolved from moment to moment. Their perfect hunting formations were torn apart by opponents who treated space combat like a living thing, growing and adapting with each engagement. Enemy fleet is showing signs of disarray, Valthrax reported, his compound eyes shifting in patterns of excitement. Their command and control structure is breaking down. They can't adapt fast enough to maintain coordination. Helena nodded. The Shroud had engineered themselves for perfection, but perfection was static. Evolution required something they had sacrificed generations ago: the ability to embrace chaos, to learn from failure, to change. Send in the Phase 3 squadrons, she ordered. Let's finish this. The final stage of the battle was testament to how far the Alliance had come. Ships of every species moved in perfect coordination, their crews combining their unique evolutionary advantages into something entirely new. This wasn't just a military victory. It was proof that cooperation between different species could create something greater than the sum of its parts. As the last Shroud command ship fell silent, Helena looked around the war room at her diverse staff. Humans, Centaurians, Delphians, and a dozen other species, all working together as natural as breathing. They had done more than defeat an enemy. They had proven that evolutionary differences could become strengths when properly understood and combined. Send word to Alliance Command, she ordered. The Shroud fleet is neutralized. And tell them this victory belongs to all of us. Not as predators or prey, but as something new. Something that can evolve. The battle marked a turning point in galactic history. The Shroud's defeat demonstrated that true strength lay not in engineered perfection, but in the messy, complex process of natural evolution and cooperation. Humanity's predatory nature had helped forge this victory, but it was the ability to channel those instincts into protection rather than pure aggression that made it possible. The galaxy would never be the same. The Alliance had become something unprecedented, a civilization that combined the best aspects of every species' evolutionary heritage. And it had all started with the recognition that being a predator didn't mean being a monster. Sometimes it meant being the guardian. Nature's legacy. The Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Alliance had changed in the years since the Shroud War ended. Where once each species sat in carefully separated sections, now the delegates mingled freely, their differences celebrated rather than merely tolerated. At the center of the chamber, Admiral Helena Santos stood before the assembled representatives, completing her final report on the conflict's aftermath. The last Shroud holdouts have been located and contained, she announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast space. But perhaps more importantly, we've begun to understand them. Dr. Chen, if you would. Dr. Yuki Chen stepped forward, her research team's findings displayed in the holographic space above the chamber. The Shroud's genetic engineering wasn't just about physical enhancement, she explained. They systematically removed what they considered evolutionary weaknesses: emotional bonds, adaptability, the capacity for doubt. In pursuing perfection, they engineered themselves into an evolutionary dead end. The images shifted to show comparative neural scans, but their base genetic structure remains salvageable. With careful restoration of their ancestral genes, future generations of the Shroud could regain what their ancestors sacrificed. They could learn to be part of the galactic community rather than its predators. A Delphian representative's bioluminescence pulsed with curiosity. You propose rehabilitation rather than extinction, even after all they did. Especially after what they did, Helena responded. That's the difference between being a predator and being a monster. We have the strength to destroy them, but we choose to help them instead. That's what humanity learned over our long evolution, the difference between having sharp teeth and choosing how to use them. The chamber filled with thoughtful murmurs as the assembled delegates considered this. A year ago, such mercy would have been unthinkable to many of them, but they had learned much from their human allies about the balance between strength and restraint. Ambassador Zirain, now the head of the Council's Defense Committee, moved their floating platform forward. Admiral Santos speaks wisdom. The Shroud believed that engineering out their capacity for change made them superior predators. Instead, it made them unable to adapt when faced with something unprecedented. Species working together, combining their evolutionary strengths. The holographic display shifted to show scenes from the final battle, but not just the combat. It showed crews of different species working in perfect coordination, their unique abilities complementing each other in ways that would have seemed impossible before the war. "Look at what we have become," Zering continued, their bioluminescence bright with pride. Not prey learning to be predators, or predators learning to be prey, but something entirely new. We have proven that diversity of species, of evolutionary history, of instinct and ability, is our greatest strength. Helena nodded, remembering the turning point in the war when the Allied fleet had stopped trying to fight like a single species and started combining their natural advantages. The Shroud thought they could perfect the art of the hunt through engineering, but they forgot the most important lesson of evolution. That perfection is stagnation. True strength comes from adaptation, from learning, from working together. The chamber's attention shifted as a new figure approached the central platform. A younger member of the Shroud species, one of the few who had chosen to accept rehabilitation. Their once black carapace had begun to show colors again, a sign that their genetic restoration was progressing. "My name is Vextar," they announced, their translated voice carrying notes of emotion that would have been engineered out of their ancestors. "I stand before you as proof that change is possible, even for those who tried to eliminate their capacity for it. Humanity and the Alliance didn't just defeat us. They showed us a better way to be strong." Helena watched as the chamber absorbed this moment. A year ago, many species had been wary of humanity's predatory nature. Now they understood that being a predator didn't have to mean being a threat. It could mean being a protector, a teacher, a guide to finding the balance between strength and wisdom. The next phase of the meeting focused on the future. The Alliance was expanding, incorporating species that had previously stayed neutral out of fear. The training programs that had proved so crucial during the war were being adapted for peaceful purposes, helping different species understand and benefit from each other's evolutionary strengths. "We're establishing a new academy," Helena announced, pulling up plans for a massive space station. "The Evolutionary Exchange Institute, a place where all species can learn from each other's natural abilities and historical experiences, not to change who they are, but to understand how different evolutionary paths can complement each other." The proposal passed unanimously. As the session concluded, Helena found herself in a quiet moment with Ambassador Zirain and Dr. Chen. "Did you ever imagine it would turn out like this?" the ambassador asked, their lights shifting in patterns of contemplation. "When humanity first joined the Alliance, many thought your predatory nature would be a problem to manage. Instead, it became the key to our survival and growth." Helena smiled, watching the diverse crowd of delegates discussing plans for the future. "The secret wasn't in being predators," she said. "It was in understanding that every evolutionary path, predator, prey, scavenger, symbiote, has value. Earth taught us that lesson over millions of years. We just helped the galaxy learn it a bit faster." Dr. Chen nodded, adding her own observation. "The Shroud thought they could engineer the perfect predator by removing everything they saw as weakness. But they didn't understand that those supposed weaknesses, empathy, adaptability, the capacity for cooperation, are what make a species truly strong." As the chamber began to empty, Helena's gaze was drawn to the massive windows, showing the star-filled expanse of space. Somewhere out there, other threats might be waiting. But whatever came next, the galaxy was ready. Not because they had the strongest weapons or the most advanced technology, but because they had learned to combine their different evolutionary legacies into something greater than any single species could achieve alone. The legacy of Earth's predators had turned out to be not just the ability to hunt, but the wisdom to know when to protect instead. And that legacy would continue to shape the galaxy for generations to come.